You ever hear that old joke? Men raises 2 kids for 18 years, then finds out they're not his. I used to laugh when I heard it, thought it was impossible, thought it could never happen to me, thought wrong. It started on an ordinary Friday night. I was sitting at the kitchen table, helping my daughter, Ella, with her science project. She's 11, smart, bright-eyed, talks a mile a minute about everything and nothing. She was cutting pictures out of a magazine, and I was trying to help her without actually taking over. And then my son, Caleb, who's 8, ran in from the backyard. Mud on his knees, a grin stretched across his face. "Hey Dad," he yelled, waving a broken stick like a sword. And I swear to you, I looked at him, really looked at him, and something twisted in my gut. He didn't look like me. He didn't even remotely look like me. Now, before you judge me, listen, I know kids don't always look like their parents. Genetics are weird. I got brown hair, brown eyes, average height. My wife, Madison, she's got blonde hair and blue eyes. So sure, Ella and Caleb both being blonde wasn't a shocker. But it was more than that. It was the way Caleb's ears tipped a little at the top, like tiny elf points. The way Ella's jawline sharpened as she grew, nothing like mine or Madison's soft, rounded features. The way neither, had even a hint of my family's strong Roman nose. I brushed it off that night, told myself I was being paranoid. But once you see something, you can't unsee it. Later, when Madison went upstairs to take a bath, I sat at the kitchen table alone, scrolling mindlessly through my phone. My brother-in-law sent me a meme. How to tell if your kid is yours, DNA doesn't lie. I laughed. Then I didn't. The next morning, I bought 2 home DNA kits. Told Madison it was for fun, something for the kids, science education. She didn't bat an eye. Almost like she had nothing to hide. The results came in 3 weeks later. A Sunday morning. Rain tapping against the windows. Kids upstairs playing some loud video game. Madison was humming in the kitchen, flipping pancakes like we were the picture-perfect American family. And me. I was sitting at the table again, staring at 2 printed reports in my hands. Probability of paternity, 0%. For both of them. I sat there, feeling like the ground beneath my feet had disappeared. Like I was falling and falling and falling, and there was no end in sight. I must have made a sound, a gasp, a choke, because Madison turned around, spatula still in her hand. "Everything okay, babe?" she asked, smiling. Smiling. Like she didn't just destroy my entire world. I couldn't speak, couldn't move. She came over and set a plate of pancakes in front of me, kissed the top of my head like she always did on Sundays. And I just sat there. Numb. Cold. Trying to remember how to breathe. The betrayal didn't hit me all at once. It was slow. Like poison in my veins. After the kids went to a friend's house that afternoon, I cornered Madison in the living room. "Hey," I said, voice tight, "can we talk?" She looked up from her phone. "Of course. What's up?" I held up the reports. Her face paled. "Are these some kind of joke?" I asked, even though I already knew the answer. She didn't speak. Didn't even blink. "I took DNA tests, Madison," I said, my voice rising. "Neither of them are mine. Neither." Still, she said nothing. Just stared at me, wide-eyed, like a deer frozen in headlights. And that silence. That silence was worse than any confession. Finally, she whispered, "I can explain." Explain. Explain what? That my life was a lie. That the family I built, the family I loved with everything in me, wasn't even mine. "I made a mistake," she said, voice cracking. "One mistake. A long time ago. It doesn't mean they're not your kids. You raised them. You love them. You're their father, no matter what." "Who?" I cut her off. My hands were shaking. "Who's the father, Madison?" Tears filled her eyes. She shook her head. "It doesn't matter." "It matters to me," I said through gritted teeth. "It matters a hell of a lot." Silence stretched between us. Finally, she whispered a name. A name I hadn't heard in years. Liam Carter. My best man at our wedding. My best friend since college. I stumbled back, like she'd punched me. No, I said, voice hollow. No. He wouldn't. She buried her face in her hands, sobbing. He did, she choked out. I did. It was the night before the wedding. I was drunk. Scared. I thought it didn't mean anything. I thought it would be over. I stared at her, barely recognizing the woman in front of me. And it gets worse, she whispered. I didn't think it could. But it did. And it gets worse, Madison whispered, still sobbing into her hands. I stood there, frozen, my heart pounding so loud I could barely hear her. What could be worse than this? I finally croaked, voice raw. She looked up at me, eyes red and swollen, like she could barely meet my gaze. She opened her mouth, closed it, opened it again. And then she said the words that shattered whatever pieces of me were still left. I was pregnant when we got married. For a second, the world tilted sideways. I stumbled back, catching myself on the armrest of the couch. Pregnant. At the wedding. The pieces clicked together so fast it made me dizzy. The rush wedding, the way her father had insisted. The hurried plans, the last-minute invitations. I thought it was just excitement. I thought it was just love. It wasn't. It was a cover-up. You knew, I said, my voice barely a whisper. You knew you were carrying his child, and you married me anyway. Madison was sobbing now, full body heaving sobs. I didn't know for sure, she cried. It could have been yours. We were together too, remember? I didn't want to ruin everything. I loved you, I still love you. I laughed. A raw, bitter sound that didn't feel like it belonged to me. Love. I spat. You don't lie to someone you love. You don't trap them into raising someone else's kids. I didn't trap you, she said weakly. I thought it would go away. That it wouldn't matter once we were a family. Go away. Not matter. I looked around the living room, the framed photos of us, the family portraits at Disney World, the Christmas cards Madison sent out every year with big, proud letters, the perfect family. It was all a lie. Every single moment. A life built on quicksand. I didn't even realize I was crying until I tasted the salt on my lips. I wiped my face roughly and took a step back from her. I need air, I muttered. Please, she said, reaching for me. Please don't leave. Let's talk about this. But I was already out the door. The cold air hit me like a slap. I walked aimlessly down the street, fists clenched, heart hammering in my chest. How do you process something like that? How do you stand on a street you've walked 100 times before, past the neighbors' houses, the playground, the old oak tree, and realize nothing about your life is what you thought it was? I thought about Ella and Caleb. Their faces. Their smiles. Were they really strangers to me now? Or worse, were they just reminders? I didn't know. And in that moment, I didn't care. All I could think about was Liam. My best man. My best friend. The guy who stood beside me on the biggest day of my life, while knowing he'd already betrayed me. The rage that built inside me wasn't hot, it was ice cold. Calculated. I wasn't just going to confront Madison. I was going to burn everything she built down. She thought she could lie to me, use me, smile in my face every day while stabbing me in the back. She was about to learn who she married. I didn't go home that night. I checked into a cheap motel on the edge of town. The kind of place with flickering lights and peeling wallpaper. It suited my mood perfectly. I didn't even sleep. I just sat on the edge of the bed, staring at the wall, planning. First thing the next morning, I called a lawyer. Not just any lawyer, the best divorce attorney in the city. I wanted someone ruthless. Someone who wouldn't just win, someone who would destroy. Her name was Caroline Vega. Sharp. Brilliant. And after I told her the basics of my situation, she agreed to meet that afternoon. Sitting across from Caroline's polished mahogany desk, I laid it all out. The DNA tests. The wedding night betrayal. The kids that weren't mine. She listened quietly, taking notes. Every now and then, her sharp eyes flicked up to meet mine, as if weighing me. When I finished, she set her pen down. "You have grounds for a fault-based divorce," she said calmly. "Adultery, fraud, emotional distress. Depending on your state's laws, you could potentially sue for punitive damages. Plus, with the DNA results, you could argue against any financial responsibility for the children." I swallowed hard. The children. Ella and Caleb. They weren't just names on a page to me. They were memories. Laughing on the swings. Falling asleep on my chest after a nightmare. First steps, first words. Could I really cut them out like cancer? Caroline must have seen the hesitation on my face. "You don't have to sever your relationship with them," she said gently. "But you need to protect yourself financially. Emotionally. Legally." I nodded slowly. "And Madison?" I asked, my voice hardening. "I want her to regret every lie she ever told." Caroline smiled, a cold, razor-sharp smile. "Then you've come to the right place." Back at the motel, I couldn't stop thinking about the night before our wedding. Where had I been? Celebrating with friends. Laughing. Trusting. And Madison. In some dark corner with Liam. I pulled out my laptop and started digging. I still had access to Madison's cloud storage, family photos, videos, backups from her old phones. She was careless like that. Trusted me too much. It didn't take long to find what I didn't know I was looking for. An old folder, tucked away in a backup. Photos. Videos. I clicked on one, heart pounding. It was Madison at her bachelorette party. Drunk. Sloppy. Hanging all over Liam. Another video, shorter. A dark hotel hallway. Madison pressed up against a wall. Liam's face close to hers. Kissing. I slammed the laptop shut, nausea rising in my throat. It wasn't just a one-time drunken mistake. It was deliberate. Calculated. Planned. The woman I thought I knew, the woman I built a life with, never really existed. And now? Now it was my turn to play a little game. First, I hired a private investigator. I wanted everything. Every secret. Every lie. I wasn't going into battle blind. Second, I opened a separate bank account. Moved my direct deposit paycheck. Started cutting off access to credit cards. Quietly, carefully. No sudden moves. Madison still thought I was just cooling off. Still texted me sweet little apologies. Still posted photos of the kids, acting like nothing had changed. But inside me, something cold and sharp was taking shape. I wasn't just going to leave. I was going to take everything she cared about. Everything she thought she could steal from me. Everything she built on the ashes of my trust. And when she finally realized what was happening, it would be too late. The private investigator's name was Mark Connors. He was an ex-cop, mid-50s, with a face like crumpled paper and a voice like gravel. When I met him in a small coffee shop downtown, he sized me up with a look that said he'd seen 1,000 men like me before, broken, angry, desperate for justice. "You want me to find dirt," he said, not even bothering to phrase it like a question. I nodded. "I want everything," I said. "Not just the affair. I want to know who she really is. What else she's been hiding. Where she's been. Who she's talked to. Every secret. Every crack in the foundation." Mark scratched his chin thoughtfully. "You sure you want to dig that deep, son? Sometimes you find things you can't unsee." I stared at him, my jaw tight. "I'm already standing in the ashes," I said. "Might as well see the fire for what it was." He gave a slow nod, like he respected that. Then slid a battered notebook across the table. "Write down everything you know. Phone numbers, places she goes, friends, co-workers, anything. The more I got, the faster I can work." I spent the next hour scribbling furiously, emptying my memory onto the pages. Mark tucked the notebook into his coat and stood up. "You'll hear from me in a few days," he said. "And son, brace yourself." While Mark dug into Madison's life, I kept up appearances. I went home. Slept on the couch. Pretended to be working through my feelings, as Madison put it, when the kids asked why Daddy didn't sleep in the big bed anymore. Every day was a test of willpower. She would smile at me over dinner. Touch my arm like she used to. Whisper apologies late at night when the kids were asleep. And every time she did, I smiled back. Played the role. Waited. Inside, I was building a weapon. And Madison was handing me the bullets with every lie she told. It was on the third day that Mark called me. Meet me, he said, without preamble. Parking lot of the old bowling alley. 1 hour. When I got there, he was already waiting, leaning against his beat-up sedan, smoking a cigarette. Without a word, he handed me a thick manila envelope. I opened it. Inside were photos. Receipts. Emails. At first, it was what I expected, Madison and Liam meeting up in secret during the first year of our marriage. Little notes passed at work. Suspicious girls' nights that were really hotel stays. But as I flipped deeper into the file, my stomach turned. There were bank statements I didn't recognize. Large cash withdrawals. Payments to someone I didn't know, a name that sent ice shooting through my veins. Trevor Sanderson. I didn't know him personally, but I knew of him. Local guy. Small-time crook. Ran shady businesses on the side. Gambling. Loans. Other, less legal things. And Madison had been sending him money. Regularly. What the hell is this? I asked, my voice tight. Mark flicked his cigarette into the snow and shrugged. Looks like your wife had more than one secret, son. He pointed to a photo clipped to the back of the folder. Madison. Sitting at a grimy diner. Across from Trevor Sanderson. Passing him an envelope. Smiling. Like they were old friends. Or partners. That night, back at home, I stared at Madison across the dinner table. She was laughing at something Caleb said, her whole face lighting up like it used to. If I didn't know better, I would have thought we were just a normal family, living a normal life. But I did know better now. And that made everything look uglier. More hollow. After dinner, I pulled her aside. We need to talk, I said, keeping my voice low and even. She smiled nervously. Of course. About us. I nodded. She followed me into the living room, perching nervously on the edge of the couch. I sat across from her, studying her like a stranger. Who is Trevor Sanderson? I asked, without any warning. Her face paled instantly. I don't know, she stammered. Liar, I said, softly. Her mouth opened. Closed. And then the excuses started tumbling out. He's nobody, just someone I met once, he helped me with a loan when we were struggling. I barked a short, humorless laugh. A loan. Madison, we weren't struggling. We were doing fine. I manage our accounts, remember? She bit her lip, panic flashing in her eyes. I didn't want to burden you, she whispered. You were working so hard, there were expenses, You just decided to take out secret loans from a criminal. I said, voice rising despite myself. Behind my back. And pay him off with our savings. Tears welled up in her eyes. I thought I could fix it, she cried. I thought I could make it right before you ever found out. I shook my head slowly. You didn't think about fixing anything, I said. You thought about yourself. About your image. Your comfort. She collapsed onto the couch, sobbing. I stood over her, feeling absolutely nothing. No pity. No love. Just a cold, detached disgust. You didn't just cheat on me with Liam, I said quietly. You cheated on us. On our family. Every day you woke up and chose to lie. She looked up at me, broken. I'm sorry, she whispered. Please, please don't take the kids away from me. I stared at her for a long moment. She still didn't get it. Still thought this was about winning me back. Saving herself. But I was long past saving. I leaned down, meeting her red, desperate eyes. I'm not taking the kids, I said softly. I'm taking everything. And I meant it. The next morning, I met with Caroline again. This time, I laid out the new evidence. The payments. The secret meetings. The lies. She smiled grimly as she flipped through the photos. This isn't just adultery anymore, she said. It's financial misconduct. Possibly fraud. I nodded. How fast can we move? She tapped her pen against her notepad thoughtfully. We file immediately. Serve her at home. And based on this evidence. She smiled again, sharp as a knife. You'll walk away with the house, the accounts, custody if you want it, and she'll be lucky to get visitation rights. I felt something loosen in my chest. Relief. No. Something colder. Vindication. It wasn't about punishing her anymore. It was about reclaiming my life. Tearing down the fantasy she built on my back. And walking away from the ashes, clean, free, whole. That night, I packed a small bag and left again. No explanation. No promises. Madison blew up my phone, texts, calls, voicemails. I ignored every one. I checked into a different motel this time. Cleaner. Quieter. And as I sat there in the dark, staring out at the city lights, I realized something. The worst part wasn't that she lied. It wasn't that she stole years of my life. It was that I let her. I trusted her. Blindly. Completely. I gave her the keys to my heart, my future, my everything. And she used them to lock me in a cage. Not anymore. Tomorrow, the papers would be filed. Tomorrow, her perfect little house of cards would come crashing down. And when it did, I wouldn't be there to catch her. I'd be the one walking away, while she drowned in the wreckage she created. The morning the divorce papers were served, Madison thought she was making pancakes. I watched her from my car across the street. Mark had advised it. Always have someone else serve them, he'd said. Safer. Cleaner. Makes a statement. The process server, a stocky guy in a blue jacket, approached the house casually. Rang the bell. Madison answered, smiling politely like she always did with strangers. Then he handed her the envelope. I could see it, the way her whole body stiffened, like she'd been shot. She called after him as he turned and walked away without a word, but he didn't even glance back. Madison stood there, barefoot on the porch, clutching the papers, the wind tugging at her hair. From the car, I watched the realization break over her face. It wasn't a fight anymore. It wasn't a misunderstanding. It was war. I didn't go home after that. Instead, I drove aimlessly for hours, past the places that used to mean something. The ice cream shop where we'd taken the kids after soccer games. The park where we'd picnicked the summer after our honeymoon. It was like driving through a graveyard where all the headstones had my last name. Finally, late in the afternoon, my phone buzzed. A single text from Madison. Please come home. We need to talk. It's important. I stared at it for a long time. Something about the wording made my skin crawl. Not I need to talk. We need to talk. Like she was still pretending we were on the same side. I didn't answer. Instead, I called Mark. You busy tonight? I asked. There was a pause. For you. Never, he said. Where we headed? The house was quiet when we pulled up just after sunset. No lights on. No sound. Mark parked 2 houses down and killed the engine. You want me to come with? He asked. I shook my head. If I'm not out in 20 minutes, I said, come knock. He nodded once, serious. I got out of the car and walked up the driveway, my fists clenched so hard I could feel my nails digging into my palms. The door was unlocked. Of course it was. I stepped inside, bracing myself for whatever trap Madison thought she was setting. Instead, I found her sitting alone at the kitchen table. The kids were nowhere in sight. She looked up as I entered, eyes red-rimmed, hair tangled, the divorce papers spread out in front of her like a bloody autopsy. Where are Caleb and Emma? I asked immediately. With my sister, she said, voice hollow. They're safe. I nodded slowly. Good. One less thing she could use as a weapon tonight. I stepped closer but kept my distance. You wanted to talk, I said. She didn't speak for a moment. Just stared at me like she was seeing a ghost. Finally, she whispered. I never meant for it to get this far. I laughed, an ugly, broken sound. This far? I repeated. You mean the lying, the cheating, the stealing? She winced like I'd slapped her. I loved you, she said, voice cracking. I still love you. I shook my head. No. You loved what I gave you. Security. Stability. A clean life. She stood up suddenly, knocking over her chair. You think you're so perfect, she spat. You think you never made mistakes. You were always working, always gone. I was lonely. I was scared. I stared at her, feeling nothing but a cold, yawning emptiness. You don't get to blame me for your choices, I said quietly. I was building a life for us. You were tearing it down. She crumpled, sitting back down heavily. For a moment, neither of us spoke. Then she looked up at me, her eyes blazing with something new. Desperation. Don't do this, she whispered. Don't take my home. Don't take my kids. They're not my kids, I said, the words landing like bullets. Her face twisted, shattered. You raised them, she cried. You're their father in every way that matters. But not by blood, I said. And thanks to you, that's all that counts now. She buried her face in her hands, sobbing. I watched her for a long moment, the last remnants of whatever pity I had burning away. Then I turned and walked toward the door. I'll see you in court, I said over my shoulder. Outside, the night air was sharp and cold. Mark leaned against his car, watching me approach. You good? He asked. I nodded. Better than good. Free. Over the next few weeks, the divorce unfolded exactly the way Caroline had promised. Brutal. Efficient. Devastating. The judge didn't need much convincing. The DNA tests, the financial records, the infidelity, it all painted a picture so ugly even Madison's lawyer couldn't sugarcoat it. I got the house. The savings. The car. Custody was more complicated. After all, Caleb and Emma weren't biologically mine. But I petitioned for guardianship, and the court agreed. Madison could have supervised visits. Limited. Monitored. She looked like a ghost when the verdict was read. Hollow. Cracked. Small. I didn't gloat. Didn't smile. I just walked out of that courtroom without looking back. But the story didn't end there. Not by a long shot. One night, about a month later, I got a call from Mark. You need to hear this, he said. He played a recording over the phone, grainy, but clear enough. Madison. Talking to Trevor Sanderson. Plotting. Scheming. Trying to frame me for financial fraud. Trying to set me up so she could get the kids back. I felt sick listening to it. Even after everything, after losing everything, she still wasn't done. Still trying to twist the knife. Mark laughed grimly. She's desperate. Dangerous. What do I do? I asked. He paused. You want revenge, right? I thought about it. Long and hard. And for the first time, I realized. I didn't want revenge anymore. Not the kind she could feel. I wanted something worse. I wanted her to know she lost. To live every day in the ruins she created. No drama. No fireworks. Just silence. A sentence with no end. The next morning, I sent my lawyer the recording. Madison was arrested 2 weeks later. Fraud. Conspiracy. Child endangerment. Bail was set higher than she could afford. The last time I saw her, she was in an orange jumpsuit, sitting behind bulletproof glass. She looked at me with hollow, dead eyes. I'm sorry, she mouthed. I nodded once. Then I stood up and walked away. Without a word. Without a backward glance. Without an ounce of regret. Because sometimes, the best revenge isn't screaming. It's leaving. Quietly. While the other person drowns in the silence you leave behind. And for the first time in years, I was free. Truly, finally free. Freedom tasted strange. For weeks after Madison's arrest, life felt hollow. I was moving through my days like a man walking through an abandoned house, the walls still standing, but the warmth long gone. The kids were the only anchor keeping me grounded. Caleb would still wake up some nights crying, calling for me. Emma clung to me in the mornings, refusing to let go. They didn't understand the full truth, not yet, and maybe they never would. In their eyes, I was still Dad. And that was enough. It was a Saturday when everything shifted again. The sun was out. The breeze smelled like spring. I was raking leaves in the backyard when Caleb came running toward me, waving a piece of paper. Dad. Someone put this on the door. I frowned, wiping sweat from my forehead, and took the paper from his small hands. It was a plain white envelope, no return address. Inside was a single photograph. Old. Faded. A group of people, clearly at a wedding. My wedding. There was Madison, standing in her dress, smiling for the camera. And next to her, holding her hand behind her back where no one could see, Trevor Sanderson. My stomach dropped. In the photo, they were looking at each other in a way no newlywed should ever look at someone other than their husband. I flipped the photo over. Written in messy, all caps black marker. You don't know everything. I sat at the kitchen table for hours after that, the photo lying in front of me like a landmine. Hadn't I already dug up enough? Hadn't I already won? But the words haunted me. You don't know everything. What else was there? What could possibly be worse than what I already knew? Mark was the first person I called. He picked up on the second ring. You sound like you've seen a ghost, he said. Maybe I have, I muttered. I told him about the photo, about the note. He was silent for a moment. Then. You want me to find out who sent it? I hesitated. Part of me wanted to burn the thing, pretend it never existed. But another part, the part Madison had shattered and left bleeding, needed answers. Yeah, I said. Find them. Mark moved fast. By Tuesday, he had a name. Lauren Becker. Madison's maid of honor. One of her best friends back then, someone who had disappeared from our lives shortly after the wedding. I hadn't thought about her in years. She works at a coffee shop downtown now, Mark said. Want me to set up a meeting? No, I said. I'll handle it. The coffee shop was small, tucked between a bookstore and a record shop. I found Lauren wiping down tables near the window, her hair pulled into a messy bun, an apron tied around her waist. She looked older, wearier, but her eyes, sharp, calculating, hadn't changed. She saw me the second I walked in. For a moment, she froze. Then she forced a smile and came over. Coffee, she offered, voice too bright. I shook my head. Just answers. Her face fell. She glanced around, then jerked her head toward the back door. Follow me. Out back, behind the shop, the alley was quiet. Lauren lit a cigarette with shaking hands. I figured you'd come, she said. Why now? I asked. After all these years. She exhaled a long stream of smoke. Because Madison's not the only one who deserves to pay. I frowned. What do you mean? Lauren looked at me, really looked at me, for the first time. You think she just cheated on you once? With Trevor? I stiffened. Lauren nodded grimly. It wasn't just the wedding night, she said. It wasn't even just Trevor. I felt the blood drain from my face. There were others, she continued. Before. After. Always. I staggered back a step, like she'd punched me. Why are you telling me this? I rasped. Lauren stubbed out her cigarette viciously. Because I warned her, she said. I told her if she didn't stop, if she didn't come clean, I would. And the photo? She nodded. One of many, she said. I kept everything. Insurance. Insurance for what? She smiled bitterly. in case she ever tried to drag me down with her. The ground shifted under my feet. All this time, I'd thought Madison's betrayal was one night. One mistake. Now I saw it for what it really was. A pattern. A way of life. I didn't even know the woman I'd married. I never had. Lauren dug into her purse and handed me a flash drive. "Everything's on here," she said. Photos. Messages. Videos. I took it with shaking hands. She looked at me for a long moment. "You didn't deserve it," she said softly. "You were the only good thing she had." And then she turned and walked back into the shop, leaving me standing alone in the alley, clutching the truth. That night, after putting the kids to bed, I sat at the kitchen table and plugged the flash drive into my laptop. File after file opened up: texts, emails, candid photos at parties, hotel receipts. There was even a video from the wedding reception, Madison slipping away from the crowd, disappearing into the dark with Trevor. My stomach twisted painfully. I had lived a lie for years. Built a family on sand. And Madison had laughed while it all crumbled under me. I wanted to be sick. I wanted to scream. Instead, I sat there, numb, as the files kept opening, one after another. And then I found it. An email. Dated 2 weeks before our wedding. From Madison to Trevor. "Don't worry. Once we're married, he'll pay for everything. He's a meal ticket, nothing more." I leaned back in my chair, staring at the screen in disbelief. It hadn't just been betrayal. It had been a plan. Premeditated. Calculated. I hadn't been her husband. I'd been her paycheck. The rage hit me like a freight train. But beneath it, colder and sharper, was something worse. Resolve. She thought she could manipulate me even from behind bars. Use my kindness against me. Not anymore. If Madison thought she'd lost everything before, she had no idea what was coming. Because now, I wasn't just taking her freedom. I was taking her name. Her reputation. Her legacy. Everything she had ever touched, ever cared about, I would expose it. Destroy it. Salt the earth so nothing could grow where her lies had taken root. The next morning, I called Caroline. "Change of plans," I said. "You want to escalate?" she asked, a hint of excitement in her voice. "Oh, we're going nuclear," I said. "Good," Caroline said. "Because I just found out something else." "What?" "You're not the only one Madison scammed," she said. "There's a whole line of people she conned, friends, family, even a charity she volunteered for." I gripped the phone tighter. "You thinking what I'm thinking?" I asked. "Class action lawsuit," Caroline confirmed. "Public. Ugly. Career-ending." I smiled grimly. "Do it." Madison had built her life like a house of cards. And now, piece by piece, I was going to blow it down. Not with anger. Not with screaming. But with cold, patient fire. Because sometimes, revenge isn't about getting even. Sometimes. It's about making sure they can never hurt anyone ever again. The lawsuit moved faster than I thought it would. Once Caroline filed the paperwork, it was like blood in the water. People came out of the woodwork, old friends, ex-coworkers, even a few distant relatives. All of them had stories. Stories about Madison borrowing money and never paying it back. About business investments that mysteriously vanished. About lies stacked on top of lies until no one even knew who they were dealing with anymore. And now, thanks to Lauren's files, we had the evidence to back it all up. Emails. Signed agreements. Handwritten notes promising repayment. It wasn't just a betrayal of marriage vows anymore. It was fraud. It was theft. It was calculated. Madison wasn't just a bad wife, she was a professional con artist who had gotten lazy. And I was about to be the one to take her down. The first court date was scheduled for a month out. Caroline warned me it would get messy. Madison's lawyer would try every trick in the book to paint her as the victim. "Expect tears," she said. "Expect sob stories. Expect lies," I added. Caroline nodded grimly. "They'll come armed. So will we." In the meantime, I focused on the kids. Emma had started asking more questions. "Why isn't Mommy coming back yet?" she asked one night, cuddling next to me on the couch. I ran a hand through her hair. "Mommy made some bad choices, sweetheart," I said carefully. "She needs to fix them before she can come home." Emma nodded solemnly. "Did she hurt you?" The question hit harder than I expected. I swallowed the lump in my throat. "Yeah," I whispered. "She did." Emma reached up and patted my face gently. "It's okay, Daddy," she said. "I'll protect you." And just like that, I broke. Tears slipped down my face before I could stop them. Because in the end, it wasn't about revenge or justice or even the truth. It was about them. Making sure they never had to live under her lies again. 2 weeks before the hearing, I got a call. Blocked number. I almost didn't answer. But some gut instinct, told me to pick up. "Hello." At first, there was only silence. Then, a voice I hadn't heard in months. Soft. Sweet. Deadly. "Hi, baby. Madison." I almost hung up right then and there. But something in her tone froze me. It wasn't the usual manipulative charm. It was desperation. "Why are you calling me?" I said, my voice flat. "I needed to hear your voice," she whispered. "I miss you." I said nothing. "I heard about the lawsuit," she said after a pause. "You don't have to do this." "You're right," I said. "I don't have to. But I want to." She let out a shaky breath. "I can make it right," she said quickly. "I have things. Information. Things you don't know." I almost laughed. "Like what?" "More lies." "No," she snapped, her composure slipping. "Real things. Things that could change everything." I leaned back in my chair. "You're out of cards, Madison," I said coldly. "You played your last hand when you cheated on me at our wedding." There was a pause. Then she said, very quietly, "You think Trevor was the worst of it?" I stiffened. "What are you talking about?" "Meet me," she said urgently. "Face to face. One time. I'll tell you everything." I hesitated. Everything inside me screamed that it was a trap. But the part of me that had been gutted by her betrayal needed to know. Needed to bury the last ghosts. "One meeting," I said. "Public place." "Of course," she said sweetly. "Anywhere you want." We met 2 days later. At a grimy little diner just off the highway, halfway between the jail and my town. I got there early, sitting with my back to the wall. I needed to see her coming. When she arrived, my heart stopped. Madison looked nothing like the woman I remembered. Her hair was limp and stringy. Her skin was pale and sickly. There were dark circles under her eyes. But even now, even in chains, she moved with that same slithering confidence, like she still thought she owned the world. She slid into the booth across from me. A guard hovered nearby, watching. Madison gave me a small, broken smile. "Hi, baby." "Cut to the chase," I said. "Why am I here?" She leaned forward. "I wasn't the only one using you," she whispered. I frowned. "What?" She glanced around, then lowered her voice further. "Trevor, he wasn't just my side piece. He was working with someone." "Who?" She smiled thinly. "Your best friend." My blood ran cold. "Mark." She nodded. "You think he was helping you find out the truth?" "He was feeding you exactly what he wanted you to know." I shook my head. "No. That's not possible." "He introduced me to Trevor," she said softly. "Before we even started dating. He pushed me toward you." I stared at her. "You're lying." She shrugged. "Believe what you want. But ask yourself this, why would a private investigator work for free? Why would he be so eager to help?" I opened my mouth, then closed it. Because I didn't have an answer. Madison smiled sadly. "We were all using you, baby," she said. "You were just too good to see it. The guard tapped her shoulder. Time's up. She stood, her cuffs rattling. But before she was led away, she leaned down and whispered. Not everyone you trust is your friend. I drove home like a man in a dream. Madison was a liar. A manipulator. A snake. But this wasn't just a lie to save her skin. There had been something real in her eyes. Something terrified. Something broken. When I got home, I found Mark's number on my phone. My thumb hovered over the call button. But I didn't press it. Not yet. I needed proof. Real proof. Just like I had with Madison. The next day, I went to Mark's office without warning. His secretary, a young woman with too much mascara and not enough tact, looked startled to see me. Ah, he's not expecting you, she said. That's the point, I said, brushing past her. Mark's office door was open. He looked up, surprised. Hey, man, he said, smiling. What's up? I shut the door behind me. Need to talk, I said. He leaned back in his chair, casual. But I saw it now. The little twitch at the corner of his mouth. The way his eyes flicked to the drawer in his desk. Hiding something. Always hiding something. What's going on? He asked lightly. You tell me, I said. How long have you been lying to me? His smile faltered. Come on, man. Don't do this. Don't do what? I snapped. Ask why my best friend just happened to know exactly where to look. Why he just happened to find the evidence I needed. Mark stood up. His hands were raised, like he could calm me down. Listen, he said carefully. It's not what you think. Then tell me, I said, voice low. Tell me the truth. He opened his mouth. Hesitated. And in that split second, I knew. Madison hadn't been lying. Not this time. Mark had betrayed me too. The ground shifted under my feet. Again. And this time, there was no one to catch me. No one to trust. No one but myself. Mark dropped the act the second he saw I wasn't buying it. He sat back down, no more fake smiles, no more friendly tone. Just cold calculation. Like he was sizing me up, deciding whether to keep lying or finally just admit it. All right, he said finally. You want the truth? I didn't answer. I just waited. He sighed and rubbed his face, like he was suddenly very tired. It started before you even met Madison, he said. I was broke. Gambling debts. Bad business deals. I needed cash fast, and there was this guy I owed a lot of money to. He had connections, dangerous ones. And I said, my voice flat. And he offered me a deal, Mark said. Find some poor, clean guy, someone with a good job, good reputation, a little naive, and set him up. He looked me straight in the eye. You were perfect. The words hit like a sledgehammer. You mean? I could barely get the words out. You mean Madison? Was part of the setup, Mark said bluntly. I introduced you to her on purpose. She was supposed to marry you, drain you slowly, get you tied up in debt so you couldn't fight back. Everything. Fake job offers. The sudden investment opportunities. The bad financial advice. It was all scripted. I felt like I was going to throw up. But Madison, I croaked. She cheated. She lied. She got greedy, Mark said, shrugging. She was supposed to bleed you dry over 5, maybe 10 years. But she couldn't wait. She started screwing Trevor behind your back almost immediately. Tried to cash out too fast. He leaned forward, elbows on the desk. And when she did, she stopped being useful. So I helped you find the truth. Helped you burn her down. He smiled, but there was no warmth in it. 2 birds, 1 stone. You'd hate her, divorce her, and lose everything in court trying to fight her. Meanwhile, I'd get a cut of whatever assets got liquidated. I stared at him, horrified. You were never my friend. He snorted. Friends are a luxury, man. I needed survival. I left his office without another word. I didn't trust myself to stay any longer. Because the rage boiling in my chest wasn't safe. Not for him. Not for anyone. I drove for hours. No music. No phone calls. Just the empty road and the sound of my own breathing. Somewhere along the coast, I pulled over and sat on a rocky cliff, staring out at the gray, restless sea. Everything I thought I knew about my life, my marriage, my friendships, even my own kids, had been built on lies. Manipulated. Controlled. Used. And now, there was no one left to blame but myself. I had let them do it. I had believed too easily. Trusted too deeply. Loved too blindly. And now, the only person who could put it right was me. When I finally got home, it was almost midnight. The house was dark except for a single light in the kitchen. Lauren sat at the table, sipping coffee, files spread out in front of her. She looked up when I walked in. "You okay?" she asked gently. I shook my head. But for once, the pain didn't crush me. It fueled me. "No," I said. "But I know what I have to do." Lauren watched me carefully. "Which is?" "Finish this," I said. "Not just Madison. Not just the lawsuit. All of it. Mark. Trevor. Everyone who played a part." Lauren nodded slowly. "You want my help?" I looked at her, really looked at her. Lauren had been the only person who never once tried to manipulate me. She had fought for me when I couldn't fight for myself. And now, I needed her more than ever. "Yeah," I said hoarsely. "I want your help." We spent the next few days building the case. Lauren was a genius. She found paper trails Mark thought he had buried years ago. She found bank transfers under shell companies tied to Trevor. She even found out that the guy Mark owed money to. He was under federal investigation. Which meant if we played this right, we could not only take them down civilly, we could bury them criminally too. Every file, every email, every check-in record was a nail in their coffin. It was slow, grueling work. Late nights. Early mornings. Dead ends and frustrations. But every time I thought about giving up, I remembered Emma's little hand patting my cheek. "I'll protect you, Daddy." No. This wasn't just about me anymore. This was about making sure no one ever hurt my family again. 2 days before the court date, Mark showed up at my house. He didn't call first. Didn't text. Just pulled up in his silver Lexus like it was any other day. Lauren was out picking up documents. The kids were with a neighbor. It was just me and him. Perfect. He walked up the driveway, hands in his pockets, casual as hell. Like we hadn't just torn our friendship to shreds. "Can we talk?" he asked, like he actually had the right to ask for anything. I folded my arms and blocked the door. "We're done talking." He glanced around nervously. "Look, man. I know you're mad." "Mad?" I barked out a laugh. "I'm way past mad." He held up his hands. "I'm just saying, we can still work this out. Cut a deal. You drop the charges, I help you get the kids full-time, we both walk away clean." I stared at him like he'd grown a second head. "You think I want anything from you?" Mark's face twisted into something ugly. "You think you're so righteous? You're not. You're just another sucker who got played. You're nothing special." I smiled coldly. "Maybe. But at least I can look my kids in the eye." He sneered. "You'll regret this." "No," I said, stepping closer. "You will." And then, without waiting for a reply, I shut the door in his face. I locked it. And I didn't look back. The night before court, I barely slept. I lay awake, staring at the ceiling, feeling the weight of everything pressing down. Doubt. Fear. Anger. Resolve. Was I strong enough to finish this? Was I ready to destroy the people who had tried to destroy me? Was I willing to become the kind of man who didn't just survive betrayal, but made it cost the betrayers everything? In the dark, I whispered the answer to myself. Yes. Because sometimes survival wasn't enough. Sometimes you had to fight back. Sometimes you had to win. Not just for you, but for everyone counting on you. At dawn, I got dressed in my best suit. Not for them. For me. To remind myself who I was. And who I wasn't anymore. No more fool. No more pawn. No more victim. Just a man ready to end this, once and for all. The courthouse was buzzing when I arrived. Reporters gathered outside, hoping for a scandal. Lawyers in crisp suits murmured in corners. Families shuffled nervously on wooden benches. But I barely heard any of it. My world had narrowed down to one focus. Finish this. Lauren met me by the entrance, a stack of files in her arms, her face serious. You ready? She asked. I nodded once. Let's bury them. Inside the courtroom, Madison sat at the defendant's table, looking pale but still trying to hold that old, confident posture. Trevor sat behind her, whispering in her ear, his jaw tight. Mark wasn't even pretending anymore, he looked like a man waiting for a funeral. His own. The judge entered, and we all rose. The air was so thick you could have cut it with a knife. Be seated, the judge said. And with that, the final act began. Lauren opened with a blistering argument. She painted the entire picture. The calculated setup, the fake relationship, the manipulation of assets, the betrayal right from the start. Every word hit like a hammer. Madison's lawyer tried to object, but the judge waved him off. Let her speak, he said. When Lauren finished, the courtroom was dead silent. Then it was Madison's turn. Her lawyer tried to spin a sob story. Tried to paint me as an inattentive husband. A cold father. A man who pushed Madison into the arms of another. I almost laughed. Almost. Because right there, in front of everyone, Madison started to break. Not because of the lies. But because for once, they weren't working. The real fireworks came when Mark took the stand. Lauren called him up, and for a moment he looked cocky, like he thought he could out-talk his way through this, like he always had. But Lauren was merciless. She dropped emails into evidence. Text messages. Bank records. Voice recordings. Piece by piece, she stripped him down until the jury saw exactly who he was. A desperate, greedy man who thought he could ruin a life and walk away smiling. At one point, Mark tried to turn on Madison, shouting across the courtroom. You were the one who screwed it up. You and your damn side pieces. The judge banged his gavel hard. Enough. Sit down. The damage was done. The jury had seen everything. And so had Madison. She slumped forward, her perfect image shattered into a million tiny pieces. When it was my turn to speak, I stood slowly. Walked to the front. Looked each juror in the eye. And I told them the truth. No theatrics. No dramatics. Just the real, raw story. How I fell in love. How I trusted. How I built a life around lies and didn't even know it. How I looked at my kids, who I loved more than life itself, and wondered who they really were. And how despite all the betrayal, the lies, the games, I still stood here today. Still fighting. Still believing that truth mattered. At the end, my voice broke. I'm not here because I want revenge, I said. I'm here because I refuse to let them win. The jury didn't take long. Guilty. Fraud. Conspiracy. Emotional damages. Madison was ordered to pay back every cent she had stolen, with interest. Mark faced separate criminal charges for his role. Trevor. His reputation was destroyed, his company dropped him the next morning. But the real victory came when the judge handed down the final ruling. Full custody of the children. No visitation for Madison, pending further review. Massive restitution payments to me. And a public statement clearing my name. When the gavel fell for the final time, I didn't feel joy. Not exactly. It wasn't triumph. It wasn't even relief. It was freedom. The long, heavy chain around my chest finally broke. I could breathe again. Really breathe. Outside the courthouse, the reporters swarmed. Flashes. Microphones. Questions. Mr. Ellis, any comment? How do you feel about the verdict? I held up a hand, shielding my kids, Emma clutching my leg, Jack standing bravely beside me. My only comment, I said, voice steady, is that sometimes the truth really does win. And then I walked away. Away from the cameras. Away from the past. Into whatever came next. The months that followed weren't easy. Madison tried appeals, of course. She cried on talk shows. Posted tearful videos online. Claimed she was the victim. But no one was buying it anymore. Not after the evidence. Not after the lies were dragged into the light. Mark tried to disappear. Rumor had it he fled the country. Good riddance. Trevor faded into obscurity, his name a punchline at best. And me? I rebuilt. Piece by piece. I sold the old house, too many ghosts. I bought a smaller place near the beach, where the kids could run barefoot in the sand and feel the sun on their faces. I got a real job, one that didn't depend on investments or shady deals. I learned how to cook half-decent pancakes. I read bedtime stories. I kissed scraped knees. I made new memories. Ones that no one could take away. One night, months later, I sat on the porch, watching the sunset bleed into the ocean. Emma crawled onto my lap, her hair smelling like strawberries. Jack leaned against my side, humming some tune from school. Daddy, Emma said sleepily. Are we safe now? I hugged her tight. Yeah, baby. We're safe. Because in the end, revenge hadn't saved me. Money hadn't saved me. Hate hadn't saved me. Love had. The fierce, stubborn, relentless love for the people who mattered. The kind that couldn't be bought. The kind that couldn't be faked. The kind that could survive anything. Even betrayal. Especially betrayal. And somewhere deep inside, a tiny, battered part of me started to believe again. Not in perfect fairy tales. Not in happy endings wrapped in a bow. But in something better. Real beginnings. Hard-earned. Hard-fought. Real. The kind of beginning that says, no matter how dark it gets, you don't stop fighting. Because sometimes, winning isn't about what you take from others. It's about what you refuse to let them take from you. And for the first time in a long, long time, I smiled.